My name is Walter Wiley Jennings, and I am honored to serve as the creative consultant and spoken word artist for the African American Burial Ground Project and the Black Cemetery Network. The African American Burial Ground and Remembering Project is an ongoing initiative which brings together local artists along with USF faculty, staff, and students to address the erasure of historical Black cemeteries in and around the Tampa Bay area. This morning's presentation is intended to provide an opportunity for remembrance and reflection through research, panel discussions, spoken word, and interactive activities. Our intention is to honor the legacy of local cemeteries by highlighting its challenges and celebrating its triumphs. Today's event is hosted in conjunction with the 2024 American Anthropological Association's conference, and we would like to take a moment to acknowledge any conference attendees that are with us this morning. If you are a conference attendee, would you please stand to be recognized? If you all join me in giving a round of applause. Thank you all so much for your patience and your participation. We are also very fortunate to have, hopefully, we have any public officials that are with us this morning. You always have to check. Yes, can you please stand? Can we give her a round of applause? We'll actually be hearing from her a little later in our program. And so I would also like to recognize my colleagues and teammates from the African American Burial Ground Project and the Black Cemetery Network. So all of my colleagues and teammates from the Burial Ground Project and BCN, if you are with us, can you please stand? Please don't make me call y'all by name. John Jackson, you know John. I know you're working with y'all know me by now, so I'm just saying, you know how this goes. I want to thank you all for your commitment and your continued partnership in this critical work. We would also like to thank Greater Bethel Missionary Baptist Church for opening their doors to partner with us in this important program. If you are a member of Greater Bethel, will you please stand? Thank you all so much for your hospitality and your partnership as well. So this is a full circle moment for me. Greater Bethel is actually my childhood church. I actually grew up here, and so probably around that side, 5 rows from the back door is where me and my friends used to sit, because we always wanted to make sure we sat by the old ladies that had the best snacks. I mean, you know, when you go to church when you're young, you know, you got to find things sometimes to go for, because sometimes Jesus don't do it, because you're young enough not to know that Jesus is all you need, but until you get to that point, you need to look insensitive. So, you know, you always found one of the elders that had more than just peppermints. You know, so if they had little strawberry candies, or they had the butterscotch this and all those things, see, they had the blessing and the anointing to be able to pour into young people, and so we always sat by them. And one of the things that I distinctly remember is that my Saturday mornings were spent here. And so there was something that I discovered, and I don't know if they're going to have any at the end of the program today, but I have affectionately learned to call it the Baptist repast. And you've probably seen it before, but you probably didn't know what it was. So it was in a punch bowl, and there's this green drink, and it's got this foam on the top of it. And so when I was younger, me and my friends made a bet, because absolutely we wasn't drinking, eating nothing that was green. And so I was the one that drew the short straw, and I had to taste this concoction. And after I tasted it, it was one of the best drinks I had ever had in my whole entire life. For those of you who may not be aware of exactly what is in it, I'm a professional fat boy, so I'm going to share this insight with you. So the Baptist repast consists of lime green sherbet, don't try no orange and all these other exotic colors, lime green sherbet, Sprite, and pineapple juice. All right, can I get an amen? Yeah. So some of y'all gonna go home, the holidays are coming up, you all know, don't just show up with this, you know, make sure you make it for yourself, try it, test it before you introduce it to your whole family. But it's one of the best drinks I've ever had, and I was introduced to that over in the fellowship hall right over there. But I mentioned that my Saturday mornings actually consisted of me being here. And at a young age, I was exposed to the importance of honoring our elders, those who had transitioned to become ancestors. And so every Saturday, my mother was bringing me here for a funeral. And ironically, it was not Oaklawn Cemetery where those individuals were interred in the 1980s, because by that time the cemetery was filled. So it was actually Memorial Park over on 22nd and MLK. So when we talk about the importance of remembering, when we talk about legacy, when we talk about being able to pass these things down, I am a product of the importance of those things. I'm a direct result of what it is like to make sure you instill these things in your children and how to ensure these values are passed down. So I'm going to ask you all to please celebrate with me and give a round of applause again for Greater Bethel, which you will hear more about in the next few minutes, and how it has been a staple, not just in the Black community, but in the city of Tampa as an institution, not just for faith, but also community and culture. Are you all ready? Yeah. All right, if you all please help me welcome Reverend Dr. Brett Snowden.
He has a lot of energy for a Saturday morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am Dr. Brett Snowden, and I serve as the senior pastor here at Greater Bethel, which is actually the historic Greater Bethel Missionary Baptist Church. We just celebrated on last Sunday 131 years of ministry in the capital community. We are delighted to have worked with Dr. Jackson and her team in preparation for this conference today. And I want to thank our staff, in particular our AV ministry. And where's Brother Jennings? There will be a Baptist repast today too in the fellowship hall when we finish. But I'm not sure if they have the lime punch today. But we are grateful that you are here. And we hope that your conference has been a success thus far and will continue to be so today. And so I won't take much more of your time, but we're going to ask Deaconess Janet Wright if you will come now to provide us with a perspective on our history and Bethel's impact in our community.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Greater Bethel, of which I am a proud product of right now. We're so glad to have you here. Now, I am Deaconess Janet Wright, and I am a member of the historical ministry here at Greater Bethel. The report that I will give to you was formed by our chairperson, Veronica Parker, and our historian, Harriet Scott. Greater Bethel Missionary Baptist Church, Inc., and Oaklawn Cemetery here in Tampa, Florida. Greater Bethel Missionary Baptist Church community history is a unique community history that in times past consisted of rich relationships from generations of African American families that lived in the neighborhood surrounding the church property, and for whom some could trace their family history to early Tampa settlements. Documented and oral history tell of Bethel's early families having a strong neighbor-to-neighbor safety net for one another. It is significant that some churches from this area in a 6-block radius were formed and are still active today. Greater Bethel, of course, Allen Temple AME, Beulah Baptist, St. Paul AME, Mount Moriah Baptist, St. John Baptist, Tyler Temple AME, St. Peter Claver, and Seventh-day Adventist, among others. They created programs and services, youth scholarships, housing, tutoring, caregiving, and other supports for families in the community. The strengths, skills, education, and love for each other added value in a real sense to the ongoing health and development of the overall community. Family-owned and operated businesses like funeral homes, automobile repair shops, mom and pop stores, barber shops, hair salons, child care, shoe repair, tailoring, sewing, rooming houses, restaurants, doctors, dentist office, segregated schools were all very integral to the core operation of this community. Interesting, Black-owned and operated funeral parlors played a critical role during the passing of loved ones, but they also provided other services as transportation, financial support for community causes, employment, and the owners often stood on behalf of the community as public speakers on various issues which affected the community as a whole. This leads us to another component of Bethel's original community, and in part is very significant and historical even today. This component is the historical Oak Lawn Cemetery, located at 606 East Harrison here in Tampa. Oak Lawn preceded Bethel, known as originally as Ebenezer Baptist Church in 1891. But Oak Lawn preceded it by 41 years, and Oak Lawn Cemetery continues to stand today as one of Tampa's most historical landmarks. Oak Lawn Cemetery was created in 1850 when Tampa was a struggling town of around 500 persons. In the minutes of the Alachua County Commissioners meeting, Oak Lawn was designated as a public burying ground for white, enslaved, rich, and poor. Originally, most of the grave markers were made of wood because there was no stone, and it was made of cypress because it was too expensive to get the stone in, which consisted of having it sailed, put on a sail ship, steamship, wagon, and transported to Tampa. The sexton house is derived and means that someone who looks after sacred objects. The sexton house, which is located within the gates of Oak Lawn, was originally known as the pavilion or gazebo, and it was constructed in 1910 to store tools and equipment their caretakers used for the upkeep of the cemetery grounds. At Oak Lawn are buried many famous pioneer families. 13 mayors of the city, 1 Florida governor, 2 Florida Supreme Court justices, and the framers of the 5 state constitutions. A portion of the cemetery was set aside for slaves and marginal persons, and public monies were designated to bury those people. Oak Lawn Cemetery is the final resting place for many people of historical providence here in Tampa, which includes the first mayor, Joseph Lancaster. He was also a judge, sitting on the Florida Supreme Court in 1851, and Speaker of the Florida House in 1843 to 1847. A persistent mystery surrounds the grave of this prominent early person. While local records, Masonic accounts, and a headstone confirm that Lancaster was buried in Oak Lawn in 1856, a memorial stone for the judge also exists in the old city cemetery in Jacksonville, Florida. Some tales have suggested that an astute politician like Judge Lancaster would have had no difficulty lying in 2 places at the same time. Thomas and Elizabeth Mitchell had 9 children. Among them was Henry, a promising young attorney who later served as the 15th governor of the state of Florida from 1892 until 1896. Henry Mitchell is the only state governor buried at Oak Lawn. James T. Magby had an illustrious career. He was an attorney, the first one in Tampa. He was also a Florida State Constitutional Convention delegate, a Florida State Senator, an early newspaper publisher, and a judge of the Circuit Court. He was also a scallywag, and this name was given to persons who changed affiliations from the South to the north after the Civil War. William and Nancy Ashley's graves are by far the most celebrated and one of the most curious of those interred there at Oak Lawn. William Ashley was a prominent white civic leader, serving as city clerk. Ashley Street in downtown Tampa is named in his honor. Nancy, the African-American servant who bore his surname, was also William's longtime companion, and it was also presumed that she was his wife outside the law. Following instructions left to William's executor, John Jackson, another very famous person in Tampa, the Ashley grave was open to receive Nancy upon her death and to commemorate their fidelity in each other, and a headstone was erected. Few pioneers had so profound an impact on Tampa as did James McKay Sr. and his family. James Sr. came with wife Matilda from Scotland to the area in 1848. He operated commercial sailing and steam vessels and was a blockade runner during the Civil War. McKay was also a mayor of Tampa from February 1859 until February 1860. James McKay Jr. is also buried at Oak Lawn, and he organized the family's maritime activities into the Mallory Line and was the civilian contractor responsible for loading troops and materials onto ships for the Spanish-American War. Like his father, James Jr. was also a mayor of the city of Tampa. And Junior and McKay, both Junior and Senior, are buried there at Oak Lawn. There are 2 mass graves at Oak Lawn Cemetery. Both are in the northeast section. The Fort Brooke mass grave. This is first adjacent to the Sexton Cottage, and it contains the remains of 102 settlers and soldiers that were originally buried at Fort Brooke. The U.S. Army fort near the mouth of the Hillsborough River that was first European settled in this area, founded in 1824, Fort Brooke was abandoned as a military post in 1832, by which time the settlement of Tampa had taken root. The second mass grave contains an undetermined number of yellow fever victims. Tampa, like many southern coastal towns and cities, was seasonally assailed by this often fatal form of this tropical fever, known throughout the South as yellow jack. Tampa had 5 outbreaks between 1850 and 1905. The worst was 1887 to 1888, and not knowing the cause of the illness, local hastily buried victims in mass graves, hoping that they could stop the spread. Ironically, a local doctor, John P. Wall, who's also buried at Oak Lawn, was correct in suggesting that yellow fever was spread by the bite of a mosquito, but he was widely disbelieved. Cemeteries like Oak Lawn exemplify the mid-19th century movement to domesticate death. The severe and invariably religious views on death and the afterlife that were held in the county's colonial period softened by the early 19th century to views that stress heavenly bliss, family reunion in heaven, and the feelings of the bereaved. Cemeteries, traditionally either family plots or crowded church graveyards, gave way to carefully designed public burying grounds where landscaping, paved pathways, and grave markers all supported the image of the afterlife as a rest forgotten. Oak Lawn is an early example of this trend called the rural cemetery. It's often misinterpreted that the squares or the dune vaults, which are raised monuments, as above ground burials. In fact, interment is below ground. But the raised monument is a countermeasure against the graves sinking in Florida's soft soil. Cradle graves do not, as is popularly assumed, mark the interment only of children. These crib-like stone or masonry forms contain seasonal flower beds. Memorial plantings were common in rural cemeteries. Popular trees and plants such as cedar, oak, ivy, and myrtle were installed at grave sites by survivors. Some endure the present day, are still there. Decorative enclosures are a charming feature of oak lawn and were very common in the 19th and 20th centuries. Made of ironwork, stone, or masonry, these enclose a single grave, or more commonly known as a family plot. The very rich stories of Greater Bethel Missionary Baptist Church and its neighbor across the street, Oak Lawn Cemetery, goes on and on and on, and we must help to keep it so. This report was compiled again by our chairperson, Veronica Parker, and our historian, Harriet Scott. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I just can't say how happy I am today because the fruition of some of the work and the efforts of my team and the community around shining a light and bringing dignity, shining the light on erased black cemeteries and bringing dignity to the dead is all around us. So it is all coming to fruition. I want to thank Pastor Reverend Dr. Snowden for allowing us to use this historic and beautiful and sacred space to have this program. So thank you. And again, I welcome all my conference goers from the AAA conference, which was the impetus of why we wanted to have this event today in this church at this moment, because we had the American Anthropological Association conference, in which I, of course, am a member because my practice is as an anthropologist. And the theme of the conference this year was praxis. How do you connect what we do and make it relevant and be relevant to the people that support us where we live and work? And so this conference, I wanted to have a moment where we were somewhere where people could understand what it means to do this work in community. I know we talked about it and I talked about it at the conference, but today is really the program that I wanted to infuse into the conference, because this is the work. And I wanted it to be accessible, and I wanted to bring together multiple communities of people and have real fellowship. And so we were able to do this in this space. So this is the praxis that I want to share with everyone. So thank you all for making the journey here from AAA. Now I want to talk about my project, the project our team has been working on, how we got here in the first place. Our project, the African American Burial Ground and Remembering Project, started in 2020 at the death of George Floyd. The University of South Florida issued a call for proposals and call for action to do something from the university level that would speak to the communities in which we work. And one of the things that my team and I proposed, because it was ongoing, present in the community, is what is going on? Why are we just now finding out that there are erased black cemeteries underneath highways and parking lots and schoolyards and all these places? Like, why is this happening? Why are we just now learning about this? And so we started this project, proposed the project for the African American Burial Ground Project, which again brings together students, faculty, staff, artists, and community members from all over the greater Tampa Bay area who are working on this. And I would like to also say that in the beginning, we really learned about this because of 2018, 2019, people like Paul Guzzo, the local reporter, was working on reporting out about these stories. And the local historians like Ray Reed were, bringing this to light. So it's not like we did that. It was just because it was brought into the Ethernet, into what was going on, that were calling attention to this. And so this is how our team came to know about it and really become concerned. And as a cultural anthropologist, what we're talking about is living people in communities. Like what is going on with the people who are alive today? What does it mean to be finding these cemeteries? What does it mean to be living like in Robles Park, the folk who went on that tour, to be living on a site where a cemetery is right underneath your complex? Like, what does it mean today that we're finding out about these sites now? So that was what we wanted to do. We really wanted to take some action about that and stop this from happening in the future. So one of the things was raising awareness and then also helping to support stopping this in the future. So the African American Burial Ground Project started as that point. As we're going forward with that, we understood that this wasn't an isolated incident, unfortunately, in the Tampa Bay area. And you'll hear from community members and the conversations today about specifically some of the cemeteries impacted by what I'm saying, but that it's a national problem. And so the Black Cemetery Network really captures that conversation and creates a platform for people who are working on these sites all over the country to be part of this conversation. So that's just a little bit of the personal background. But I just want to say, I know that over the course of this last 3 days, I have felt the presence of my ancestors, my great-grandparents and grandparents. I'll call out their names because I know that it is their it's their spirit that really has been telling me and calling me to make sure I pressed on with some of this work, some of these questions, and not let up. So my maternal grandparents, Daisy Grimes and Leonard Grimes from New Orleans, they're deceased. And then my paternal grandparents, Jesse Jackson Sr. and Oral Lee Jackson. And then I want to say my mom is in the audience today too. So again, she's been here supporting all of me and my mom and my sister. So this is all full circle because a lot of what I learned about who I am has been through my grandparents and particularly their connections to, honoring the dead and making sure that ancestors, their wisdom, their knowledge, their work, their lives, were celebrated. And so I just can't say enough about that connection for me. I have asked, I'm going to cede a little bit of my time. I talked again about the Black Cemetery Network. The institute that I formed also contains the Black Cemetery Network, the African American Burial Ground Project. And so those are places for a system, to create a system for talking about and providing resources for people working on these types of projects. So that was the reason for those. But I really want to give a moment for a person, Ms. Gloria Jean Royster, to come up for a couple minutes or so to really link what I'm talking about and what the previous conversation was about the history of Oak Lawn Cemetery, and to bring to light at least one of the ancestors that are buried there and make that connection for us. As part of the reason for Praxis and having it here was the proximity to the cemetery. So I'll ask Ms. Gloria Jean Royster to come up and just give us a few words about one of the people buried there. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Jeff Moats, formerly with the Florida Public Archaeology Network, West Central, said in a video that one of the baddest people buried at Oak Lawn is a woman by the name of Madam Fortune Taylor. And in the first clip of Dr. Antoinette's presentation, there is the Taylor headstone for Madam Fortune and her first husband, Benjamin. Why did Jeff say she is the baddest person there, outside of 13 mayors and a governor and the Ashleys who have a street name for them? Because if you're at the cemetery and you go outside the west wall, there is a street sign that says Fortune. The street was named for her in the late 1800s, and then between 1871 and 1875, and then in 1892, a bridge was built that connected to her street. So that bridge became the Fortune Street Bridge. Benjamin and Fortune were citrus farmers. They were among the first citrus farmers, white or black. They helped bring the citrus industry to Tampa. It's been documented. Benjamin lived a short life. He died at age 45. Fortune Taylor held on to their 33 acres, which is now the part of the Tampa River walk that connects to the bridge. She held on to the land for 6 years till someone comes along and purchases it. And he creates what was called the city of North Tampa. Not the North Tampa you know today, but the Tampa Riverwalk used to be its own city. And we believe that he named Fortune Street in Madam Fortune Taylor's honor. Fortune Street existed from 1871-75, the bridge, 1892 until the 60s, and we all know what happened during the 60s. The interstate comes through, and there's urban renewal, and the city of Tampa decides to reroute Fortune Street and disconnect it from the bridge. And in 2017, that's when I began to hear her voice. And a group of people that became known as the Fortune Taylor Movement, we were able to reverse that travesty of history and get her name back on the bridge. So today, this person who's buried at Oaklawn, whose street is right next door, now's name graces the bridge once more as the Fortune Taylor Bridge. She is one of the pioneers buried right across the street at Oaklawn Cemetery. Thank you, Dr. Jones.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am Iyawo Oya, and I would like to first of all say thank you for sharing your stories. They're all heartfelt. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. Time's table has never really been able to place me. Hourglass seated partially in my waist, but nothing's moving. Ants in my pants, toes midnight blue, the sands have grounded me, my wristlet too long ago, so nothing drains. Every now and again the dust clears, but there is no reflections here. No complaints, no competitions, no comic complacencies, just time and me. Being buried alive is not the most popular way to perish, but I'm banking on it being more exciting than solid fork to the left. Or the daily mundane monologue of good morning, hi, good afternoon, evening, bye. Mustard through a false smile, all the while I'm thinking to myself, why won't they shoot me already or give me a new book so that I may recall the narratives of my past struggling. This American soil was fertilizing my children's blood. Take me home. I've been locked in dungeons. I've been a slave. I've been poisoned. Take me home. There is something about Florida's weather, Florida's water. I am Florida's daughter. There is something about the magpies and midday showers that rain down both heaven and hell, getting my soul ready for the next lifetime where I will continue to fight. Ashe.
Can you all please help me give a warm round of applause for all of our presenters from our first segment.
I want to thank Ms. Wright for defining scallywag.
Because, you know, certain stuff change over time. And so, you know, I just wanted to say thank you very much for keeping confusion out of the church. All right, are you all enjoying yourselves? Yes. Are you all learning something? Yes. Outstanding, excellent, excellent. We will now move on to part 2 of our program, which highlights the current programs and resources for cemetery preservation. Joining us first in this segment will be Patricia Myers-Gadusco, who serves as a supervisor of the Florida Division of Historical Resources, and she will share on potential grant and funding options. Next, we will hear from attorney Stephanie Franklin, the president and CEO of the Franklin Law Group, who will advise on legal support and consulting. Following attorney Franklin, we will hear from Dr. Hilary Van Dyke, professor at the University of Tampa, and she will discuss how to create educational tools and resources to inform youth outreach. Finally, to close out this segment, we will hear from community host of Tampa's community radio station, Poetry Is, on WMNF 88.5, and the founder of Inc. of Genesis, Miss Alice Saunders. So at this time, if you all will please help me welcome to the podium Miss Patricia Myers-Gadusco.
It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here. Normally, I'm in the driver's seat. I'm used to having a clicker, and I've got a few things happening, so just bear with me, and with the lovely person upstairs who's going to advance the slides for me. My name is Patty Myers-Gadusco, and I am the supervisor, unfortunately not of the whole division of historical resources, that would be lovely, but of a very exciting part, the Historic Cemeteries Program. It said that there are 2 realms within every cemetery. One inhabited by the dead, and one inhabited by the truly dead. The dead are the ones whose names are still spoken and whose graves are still visited. The truly dead are those whose names have been forgotten. And I'm going to pause here for just a second because we've heard so many amazing stories of people who are interred here in the cemetery. And I want you to think about the cemeteries that are filled with those who no longer have anyone come to visit, whose names are no longer known. And those are incredibly rich stories that we can no longer share. So our program is here to help protect. Stay there for a second. Our program is here to help protect the burial spaces of those who are dead and those who are truly dead, and try and move some of those truly dead back into that other category where we can recapture those stories. If you could forward. So our mission is to serve as a governmental center, encouraging municipalities, planning departments, colleges and universities, community organizations, and other stakeholders to work together to preserve, rehabilitate, and share information relating to abandoned and historic cemeteries. And I want to address that word abandoned in the very beginning. It is a way of describing cemeteries that are no longer active as it relates to grants, which we're going to come to. So I'm not suggesting in any way that just because a cemetery does not have descendants who are aware of it, that it has intentionally been abandoned. If you can move forward. So our program duties and responsibilities is a very long list. I've put just a few of them up here. The one that you see me doing is coordinating with the Black Cemetery Network. That is built into our program's language, so I'm so excited to have this opportunity for partnership. If you'll click one more time. The next one that I want to talk about that is incredibly important is coordinating the recording and updating of our Florida Master Site File. For cemeteries that are more than 50 years old, this puts them into that historic cemeteries category. You can move forward. For those who may not know, the Florida Master Site File is the state of Florida's official database of all our historical resources. You can see the list of different resource types there. Of course, the one that my program is focused on is historic cemeteries. But broadly, this site file, this database, has records and information on over 266,000 cultural resources and copies of over 29,000 manuscripts. That's a lot of information, but if you'll click, of these, only 2,101 are historic cemeteries. This is our most under-recorded resource type. And if you'll click again, the reason that that matters is that this documents the condition of a cemetery now and allows us to look at how that changes over time. And it also creates a permanent record so that when development is going to occur, a city, county, municipality can require a cultural resource assessment survey, and this consultant is going to reach out to us at the state and say, all right, what cultural resources might be impacted from that big long list on the last slide. If we don't know the cemetery is there, if we don't have it recorded, we can't provide that to the developer, and that creates just all kinds of concerns down the road. You click. We work closely with Florida Public Archaeology Network. If you haven't heard yet, there are 8 regions throughout the state. Whatever county you're from, take a quick look at what region you're in, and if you've never met with FPAN in the past, please look them up, and they're a wonderful organization to connect with. Move forward. One of the things that we've done in partnership with FPAN is create a historic cemetery inventory form. And we really want you guys to share your information. You can, down at the bottom, you see it says fpan.us/HCI. That we have actual postcards that you can mail in, but the easiest way to get this information is go to that website and you can fill in information about any cemeteries you're familiar with, and that allows us to check and say, is it in our database? Anyone who fills that out or sends or goes to that link will receive an email from us letting you know, yes, we have that recorded, or no, we didn't, thank you. Thank you for letting us know, and then we'll follow up on it. You can click again. So, along with my program, which is brand new, I am actually celebrating 1 year of being with the program the Monday after Thanksgiving. So, in our first year, we really hit the ground running. And one of the other things that the legislature did is they created an abandoned African American cemeteries grant. This is awarded on a competitive basis. It does not fund operational support, and the amount is determined annually, but we've had 3 cycles already in just 1 year. 3 grant cycles have been open. We are getting ready. We've reviewed 2 cycles. We'll be reviewing the next one in the beginning of the new year, but then April 1st will be our 4th cycle that will open. Once that one does, we'll get on the normal grant cycle, which is 1 a year. But please kind of keep that in mind. If you have a cemetery that you're interested in grant money for, and I'll tell you how it qualifies in just a second, keep that April 1st date in mind so that you can be ready. I'm really encouraging applications for this grant. If you can go forward again. In order for a cemetery to be eligible, it has to be primarily African American in nature for those that are interred there. It has to have been previously recorded. Now that does not mean it has to be in our Florida Master Site File. It just means that its location has to be known to someone. It can be known to your group and you're now bringing it to us for the first time, that's fine. The reason this is a requirement is because we don't grant money to just go out and say, well, we heard there might be a cemetery somewhere in these 10 acres. You know, we can't go find it in those 10 acres, but if you know the location of a cemetery, it is eligible. The burials need to be primarily 50 years old or older, and it cannot be a licensed cemetery. And that's a little confusing to some people, but most cemeteries are not licensed. Unless you're a big commercial cemetery, you're generally not licensed here in the state. If you can forward to that, next. There are 2 project types. One is cemetery research, and that goes to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, the importance of the stories of those people who are interred within these cemeteries. This is for genealogical and historical research. It helps identify who is there and allows for the ability to contact descendants, which is what an amazing gift. If someone reached out to you and said, I know where your great-great-grandfather is. Would you like to know? Would you like to be part of this process? So that's one project type. And if you'll forward. The next project type is protection. This project type is to repair, restore, and maintain cemeteries that fall within that abandoned African American cemetery category. There are many, many things that you can do with this. One of the ones that have been popular are GPR, ground penetrating radar surveys, to identify where burials are located when they're no longer marked. It can also be used, a lot of times vegetation has to be cleared before you can even get a GPR machine in there. So when vegetation is threatening the resource, and in this case in a cemetery it generally is, if it's that overgrown, it can be used for that. It can be used to create a maintenance program, which is something we highly recommend. So there are a lot of things that fall under the project type protection. You can have more than one, you can have a protection project and a research project for the same cemetery, as long as there are two different organizations applying for it. One specific organization can only have one grant type within that same grant year. And I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but I am going to provide a way to contact me and get more information after this. So if you can click forward. We have other grants as well. Sometimes it's an active cemetery that still needs care, and it doesn't fall into that abandoned African American cemetery. On April 1st, we'll be opening a grant cycle for small matching grants as well as special category grants. The thing with these, sometimes that first one I told you about, there's no match requirement. Small matching grant, there's up to $50,000 and it's a dollar for dollar match requirement. However, if you're in a rural economic development initiative community, many of these are, that is waived. If you're a certified local government or a Main Street organization applying for it, that is waived. Special category is bigger. It can go up to $1 million. The match is reduced to 25% if it's a ready community. It's 50% otherwise. These can be used for development projects and other preservation related tasks. Okay, if you could click. So how can you help? Get involved. I'm using Suwannee County as my poster child. So you can see on this map, in each county, it tells you how many cemeteries we have recorded with the master site file. For Suwannee County, we only have 5 when I started. So if you'll flip to the next one. When I spoke with their historical commission, I learned that they've recorded 116. It just never made it to the state. So it's just by sharing your knowledge that we can get that first level of protection put in place. Getting these cemeteries recorded, you can help us flip the numbers. One more. Just to highlight how one individual can make an impact, I want to give a shout out to Chris Nolan, who's an FPAN volunteer for the past 7-8 years. I'm not even sure how long she's been doing it. I was involved with FPAN before I came to the state, so I've worked with Chris for a long time. Of those 2,101 cemeteries, 15%, and I would say a little higher because she just dumped another 200 in there, have been recorded by just one volunteer. So if I could get even 10 more Chris Nolans, maybe one of you is my next Chris Nolan, reach out to me and we can talk about how we can get those numbers changed. Okay, if you could click again. One more time. Great. This historical marker commemorates the mass burial site of many of the individuals who died in the 1928 hurricane that was immortalized by Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I use this because it doesn't matter if it's one burial or a mass burial. These people's stories matter. And the way that we can recapture them is by working together. So if you'll click one more time. I am a big Walt Disney fan, and I love this quote. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. And I think that's what the Black Cemetery Network is doing, and I think that's what the state is doing, and I hope that's what you will join us in doing. So click one more time. One more time. Those are other organizations. Okay, stay there for a sec. This is how you can get a hold of me. Historic cemeteries at dos.fl.gov. My direct line up there, 850-245-6361. That goes to my desk, and I have it forwarded to my cell phone when I'm not in the office. Call me anytime. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So I want to first I want to address, the pastor, Reverend Dr. Snowden, I think he stepped out. I wanted to thank him and his congregation for allowing this wonderful event here today. I want to thank you very much, Dr. Jackson, for answering the call, for listening to your ancestors, because your direct ancestors are helping all of our collective ancestors. And I'm greatly appreciative of that. And thank you, Ia, from another Ia. So my name is Stephanie Franklin, and I am the president and CEO of the Franklin Law Group, and I'm an attorney in Maryland. And I want to be very brief about how I connected with supporting the Black Cemetery Network. It was, in fact, my ancestors that led me to Dr. Jackson and really called me to support the Black Cemetery Network legally, using my skills to do so. So with that said, next slide. Okay, thank you. The legal issues around Black cemetery protection and preservation can be quite involved. And it's very difficult to be able to speak to the depth and the complexity of those legal issues in a 10-minute time span. So I'm going to give you something on a very superficial basis. I do want to let you know that I will be here for another additional 45 minutes after the program ends. So if there are specific questions that you would like me to answer, I will do that. So what we're going to discuss in this time period are the legal issues that arise and case examples and strategies to overcome those legal challenges, future legal efforts to assist with Black cemetery protection and preservation. It looks like if you're looking at the slides, I think probably in sending, they got a little juxtaposed. They're kind of scattered around. So if you see me looking at my phone, this is what I'm looking at. Okay, can we move to the next slide? Great. So the legal issues that tend to arise with these, individuals or families that have no legal ownership of the cemetery, individuals or families, loved ones have been reinterred with or without the family's knowledge. The government has built a public building, a roadway, etc., over your loved one's final resting place with or without your knowledge. And then a private citizen purchases land from a private owner where you may have had access previously, but now this new owner does not want to give you access to the cemetery. That comes up. Next slide. So I want to talk about this particular cemetery. The Point of Rocks Colored Cemetery of 1879 is located in Frederick, Maryland. Frederick is about an hour west of Baltimore and an hour west of Washington, D.C. And there was a strong Black population, those who were descendants of U.S. chattel slavery in that particular area. Now, this particular cemetery, I think, is incredible because not only is it one that needs to be celebrated for many reasons, but you have the descendants who have maintained this property for well over centuries. But the most recent deed that they had was 1879. Okay? So this cemetery is part of land that was purchased by a colored Methodist Episcopal church that had a school on it, that had this burial ground on it, so on and so forth. The current descendants had no legal ownership at all. They had no papers again. The most recent was 1879 deed. So because they are a member of the Black Cemetery Network, I said, well, let me consult with you. So then I went further in terms of not just consulting, but actually obtaining legal ownership for them. And I want to tell you, it's been a very involved endeavor, but because these descendants have kept or have researched and maintained a number of the documents, I think it's been a lot easier than probably others, right? So they had the deed. They had applied for the African American Preservation grant through, we have a specific African American History and Culture Commission in Maryland. They have gone through the lengths of having the deed really kind of translated in some ways, because back then, if you look at very old deeds, they're in very deep cursive, and sometimes it's difficult to read them. They have partnered with different colleges and universities to help them maintain that property. And this particular family, particularly the elders, have been pulling together for centuries in keeping up that property. And in fact, they actually built that Point of Rocks Colored Cemetery sign, right? They built steps that went up, that actually, because Frederick is located near the mountains, near the Blue Ridge Mountain. So you actually have to walk up to this property. It's a very beautiful property. They've created Facebook groups looking for descendants that are connected with this cemetery. They have family reunions talking about this particular cemetery and their desire to obtain legal ownership. So if you go back to 1879, I went through all of those changes, like all of those title changes, to make sure that that property was clear. And it took a lot, because what I noticed, it was quite a bit of learning for me as well, because what I had noticed is how the property had been separated, how it had changed hands a number of times. And there's more to this story around that we haven't fully uncovered. But going, again, looking at some of the estate documents, there's a lot involved in this. So finally we're here, right? And what do I mean when I say we're here? There's no record of anything except for that deed, really. And so I said, okay, legally, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to do this? So without getting too technical, I had to file a legal document called a complaint to quiet title. And then I utilized the legal basis of adverse possession. So adverse possession meant that in Maryland, if there are people who are not, quote unquote, technical legal owners of the property, if they have maintained that property in some shape or form for 20 years or more, then you can assert that they own that through adverse possession. And so that's what I filed. And so with those legal filings, I filed all of these things that I just told you about, right? I have exhibits that support the fact that this family has been maintaining this property for well over 20 years. I documented it by the family reunion conversations, the Facebook, the different Facebook postings where, and I want to say their names because I think it's very important. Donna Nelson and Eric Ashby Bay. I mean, they have kept, and in particular, Miss Donna, have kept meticulous records. And she is a strong advocate for Point of Rocks Colored Cemetery. They've been in newspapers. See, they make things very public, and I used all of that to support them obtaining legal ownership. So what's happening now is that we have until about December 22nd. Because, there are unknown heirs. This is heirs' property. So you have these trustees of a church that purchased this particular property. This cemetery has been on this property for centuries. But a number of people have died. And they have a whole bunch of descendants, right? So in legal strategies, I'm having family meetings. I'm trying to work through things. I'm like, I need the family tree. And I mean, there's a lot of people, right? And I had to go through all of these things. But there were some that are living descendants that are the eldest of the descendants that agreed, and they provided their agreement in written form that I utilized as a legal supportive exhibit, that they want to deed their interest in the property to these people. And then there are a number of them that are unknown. So I'm sure Florida probably has something similar, but in Maryland, you can name unknown heirs. But there's a particular procedure within which you have to notify them. And again, I don't want to get too technical. And this can get very boring for people, and I get it. I love it, but you have to, whenever you are serving a particular party in a lawsuit, they have to receive notice. Well, how are you going to give notice to people that are unknown? Right, so but the statute, the laws provide ways that you can serve unknown heirs, and it's very prescriptive. And so that's happening as we speak. Like, their complaint to quiet title with all of the exhibits and all of the motions and things that I filed are actually on the courthouse door, just like anything else. And we have about another about 3 weeks. And that's going to be done, and so far nobody has responded to it. So I'm pretty 99.9% sure that they're going to have their secured ownership either by the end of this year or early next year. And this is a family that has maintained Point of Rocks Colored Cemetery for centuries. And so to be able to support that effort, is an incredible honor to me. And I just want to say that. Okay, next slide. Let me see if I can see this. I may have to look. Okay, so I have to look at my phone. That's a little hard for me to see. So I want to give you, like I said, these are very, very basic strategies. But again, when you're talking about cemetery protection and preservation, and you're talking about legally doing so, it can get very complicated, which is why I want to be available to speak to you after this event. So you really need to gather all of your pertinent paperwork regarding any information about your loved one's burial. Some people just don't have it, right? They really, like, literally don't have it. And this seems very simple, but gather that paperwork. And if you are a younger person, you need to start doing that for your elders, okay? And keep that paperwork organized. Talk to family members and members in the community to gather information about your loved one's burial and location of where they are buried if you do not have paperwork. Let me say this is the South. And one thing I really, really love about it is that you can really just talk to folks, and folks will start talking to you. And they'll tell you a lot, right? And so, for example, my siblings and I were born in Maryland, but my parents are part of this out-migration going north from Florida. My father is from Jacksonville. My mother is from Mariana. And so, in my own genealogy work, and going back, I was in a cemetery where a number of my family members were buried, and it was something I didn't know. And I knew I could just talk to somebody in the neighborhood, and they were pointing me right in the direction. I just told them, you know, I'm Sue's daughter, her oldest daughter. Oh, yes, sir. And then they tell me, and they start pointing me to who I need to talk to. So that's a very important piece. And don't ever negate that piece. The community and the information that they've retained, their memory is powerful. Identify an attorney in your state, your county, or your city who can help you with your legal issue. So look for attorneys that provide legal work in estates and trusts, real property, and heirs property. Contact your local and state historical societies, state archives, local and state bar associations, and the Black Cemetery Network with help identifying an attorney. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Request a family meeting, this is very important, with the attorney to provide information about the legal challenges you're having. And you may not even know what the legal challenges are, but if you actually consult with an attorney and they listen to your story, they should be able to identify what some of your challenges are. And lastly, I said, and this is pretty generic, and I'm going to get a little deeper into it, but raise public awareness about the plight of your family cemetery. Create social media presences, connect with local media outlets to speak about your family cemetery and the challenges you are facing. What I didn't put on this slide, because I'm keeping it very narrow, because this is kind of the legal strategies. Legal strategies don't come in a vacuum. There is a particular cemetery in Frederick again, because this was another family that contacted me where there was a hospital built over their cemetery where their loved ones are. And so to untangle that, because it's already been done, we're looking at an activist type of space now, right? Where there needs to be community organizing. There needs to be legal strategy in that. There needs to be policy strategy in that, political strategy. It can become very complex. And so with that particular cemetery, or group of that family, I had like a 2-hour meeting with a number of their descendants, telling them, in order to get to this legal strategy, there are certain things you have to do first. Because this is what people don't, well, maybe you do know. That public pressure, that organizing also can make it to the courts. It's not that judges and attorneys don't read the newspaper or know what's happening in their community, and they can be influenced by that. So the voices of the people, very, very powerful. So I really wanna leave that there, where there needs to be an integrated strategy when things become very complex, particularly when you have a public erection that is over top of a cemetery. There's a lot that needs to be undone, and there are a lot of ethical issues you need to think about too. Do I want my loved ones moved? What does this mean? Do I want them reinterred? There's a lot there. But there needs to be a strategy that comes from the community that involves the legal strategy, but also the policy advocacy and the community organizing. And the awareness, the media awareness. Okay, next slide. Future legal efforts to assist with Black cemetery protection and preservation. So it's been several months now, maybe a little shy of a year. Dr. Jackson pulled together a group of us to put together a proposal for the National Bar Association, which is the National Black Bar, about Black cemetery protection being an initiative that they take up. I'm one attorney, right? I'm one attorney, and I do this volunteer, and it's a lot of time. So I don't get to, forsake my other cases and the work that we do in our firm, because I gotta eat. So the bottom line is the National Bar Association, and we have sent a proposal to them that I think is very promising, is looking at incorporating Black cemetery protection and preservation in one of their initiatives, as one of their initiatives. And what that would mean is that they not only have national reach, they have global reach, right? So we're hoping that with them incorporating that into their initiatives, that we would get attorneys from all across the country that would be willing to help protect Black cemeteries, either pro bono or on a limited cost basis. And this is a big deal because, as you know, each state has different laws, right? And so here I am in Florida, but I'm not a barred Florida attorney. So there's certain things that I'm unable to do, is I'll be practicing law unauthorized. And I don't want to lose my license in Maryland. But I'm saying that to say that this is a promising effort. We've had ongoing communications, again, that look promising, and we're hoping in the near future that we will be able to make that announcement in support of the Black Cemetery Network. So thank you for your time, and please, I am available.
I just want to emphasize this, Attorney Franklin has really, again, she articulated how she has raised the bar to step up to the plate to get this conversation started on free, pro bono. So we got to emphasize that, and now we put a toehold in this conversation so that we can get other support. So I thank you for partnering with me, but we had no resources, but she agreed to take this on. So this is a very big step. So thank you.
All right, y'all. Hello. My name is Dr. Hillary Van Dyke. Whoever is the person in the sky with the powers. Could you actually go to my last slide first? As I saw the difficulty of reading, I want to have you all, thank you. If you all could, you can go ahead and scan that just so you have access to the link before I start talking about it. And while I give you a moment to scan that, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Hillary Van Dyke. I'm currently a visiting professor of education at the University of Tampa. I'm also the co-founder and executive director of the Green Book of Tampa Bay, which is a Black-owned business directory. Those of you that are in town visiting from elsewhere, while you're still in town, go to greenbooktv.com to find Black-owned businesses to eat at, and maybe get a massage, do some yoga, I don't know. But it's also on Instagram and Facebook at greenbooktv. And then I'm also I have a small business where I do a lot of consulting with educational institutes and nonprofits, and so those are all the things that I do. But one of the things that I have been a part of has been the African American Burial Grounds Network in helping with trying to create resources for teachers to use. Okay, so I think now you can go to slide 3. So one of the things that we created was this warehouse of cemetery education lesson plans. It's definitely in its starting place with this, but there are, I believe, 8 lesson plans up here that are related to several cemeteries. But one of the reasons that this matters is, for my dissertation, the work I did was thinking about how to use historically Black cemeteries as places of learning, particularly to teach Black history and to teach Florida history. However, one of the things that I learned in the process is teachers would be a lot more likely to jump into this if they had some resources to help support them. And so through that work, I got connected with Dr. Jackson, and here we are. So this is the start of this work, I'll definitely say, but I think in the future we'll definitely have more. Another thing that's really important about the way that we went about this is I created the lessons, but I also worked with Michelle Anderson, who is the head of social studies in a local school district here, to have her actually review the lesson plans to make sure I wasn't breaking any of our fun laws around how to teach Black history that we have here in Florida. And one of the things that also helped by having Michelle review the lesson plans is she also really helped me bring in even more standards that I didn't necessarily realize were actually being addressed. And the last note, we actually do have a new set of standards that were created in Florida, the African American history standards. However, they haven't yet been embedded into the actual course flows for anything. So one note that I'll say about these lesson plans is none of them use those standards because, again, if we want the teachers to use them, we need to make sure they're connected to actual standards that they're going to teach in classes like U.S. history, econ, etc. So perhaps in the future when they get embedded into the courses, we'll use those standards, but these are just your traditional normal standards that we use, and one day hopefully we can actually include those as well. So with that, You can go to the next slide. So for now, we're featuring the 4 cemeteries that are under, big construction projects. So we have Evergreen, Moffett, Oaklawn that are underneath the parking lot of Tropicana Field, and then Zion Cemetery that's underneath Robles Park Village. The way that these lesson plans are really centered is it's a combination of teaching folks history about people in the cemetery or things related to the cemetery, or actually trying to engage civic action in students. You can go to the next slide. So the list that was just there are, if you click it, it'll take you to lesson plans. Oh, sorry, go back. So it'll take you to lesson plans specific to the cemetery that you click on. But every single lesson is essentially set up in this way where you have, it's all high school for now, social studies, it's connected to social studies standards, and they're anywhere from 1 to 2 class periods long with different objectives. It has this list out of all the materials they need, and every single worksheet they need, all of it is all included in the same PDF, so the teacher does not have to leave this document to find what she needs for the lesson. I'm saying she because I'm a she, her, but anyways, whoever the teacher is. And especially like there's a video, it's linked, so it's meant to be very, very easy to use and easy to access all the things that they would need. You can go to the next slide. And then, so you just have an example of even here, just like very particular directions. As a teacher, you're always going to, if you have a lesson plan like this, you're going to look through it and make it yours. So it's not that we're expecting people are going to follow it 100%, but definitely this guide of how to start this conversation. Another thing that's really important, if you go to the next slide, is really grounding the work in having students explore primary source documents. And I think that's really important because then the students get to make their own meaning based on resources from the time versus like us trying to put our own perception on something. So they're actually getting to look at the things from the time as well as looking at some modern resources, etc. So I think that's the last slide I have. Yes, so definitely check out the website. If you are local and you know a teacher of history in social studies in Pinellas, Hillsborough County, please send them this link. The other thing that we have are some professional development sessions that are just on Zoom to help them better understand these sessions. So hopefully we'll get some folks to sign up for that. There is definitely a community appetite to learn more about cemeteries, and we're hoping to also instill that interest in the schools as well. So thank you.
This is another pioneering effort that we're bringing together, and Dr. Hillary Van Dyke stood up and took the challenge to really create something for the African American Burial Ground Project and the Black Cemetery Network. So again, these are efforts that are being launched that are very pertinent to the things that we've been learning about what the community needs around this work. So I'm so excited about the growth that's coming, and it's already started. So thank you again, Dr. Van Dyke, for all your work and stepping up right away to start this. And it's on the African American Burial Ground page, where we also have those lesson plans now. We're going to have genealogical records up there for some of those cemeteries. We also have oral histories up there. So go to that site. That link will take you all other places as well. And we're growing it. So you see the people that are just being attracted and really helping us. So thank you all for all the work they've been doing.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. This poem is titled Sight Not Found. Statistics report that over 100 Black cemeteries have been effaced nationwide. That means numerous ancestors have been stripped of their dignity and disconnected from their lineage. Theories backed by research suggest a strong possibility that memories may be embedded in human DNA. So I wonder how many of my ancestors I carry within me. How many contribute to my character? Not just their blood, but their memories and their trauma. The last time I did a genealogy search, I came up short. I was left with too many blank pages. I've never felt more lost than when I tried to uncover who I was based on where I came from. What happens when someone erases a page or rips it out altogether? How am I supposed to break generational curses and teach others who look like me how to do the same? People perish because of a lack of knowledge. But I can't help but wonder if that was the enemy's plan all along. In 2023, 40 to 50% of over 3,500 cemeteries in Florida were reported to be abandoned and neglected. Stories can be manipulated, but data speaks to another level. How we move forward after the exposure of this information will shape the Black community's culture, which inherently affects America's possibility for a sustainable future. For society's sake, we are better and stronger together. So while my hope may sometimes falter, it will never completely diminish because I know where my help comes from. The word was written, but it was spoken first, and it will not return void. So contrary to the enemy's efforts, I am not lost. I am found. Every time I come to myself, I realize I am a walking, living, breathing collection of epiphanies. I am the manifestation of my ancestors' prayers. My ancestors are not forgotten. Their stories are my prologue. As I live, I become a continuation of their story. I take up space because I carry my ancestors with me. Their success is a never-ending story authored by God, whose love for them is stronger than any hate against them. So what was meant for their evil was recycled for their gain because God is strategic. So I'm here to encourage you to fight the good fight, even when it is difficult, and it is difficult. We're not always offered a safe space to speak our truth because sometimes doing so makes us the liability to those who enjoy living that lie. American history is not a story of winners and losers or the strong and weak. It is a forbearing tale of the haves and the have-nots. And by have-nots, I mean those who were stolen, those who had their work taken, and those some had attempted to erase from history altogether. So fight the good fight. Speak your truth and embrace your voice. I hope this truth makes everyone uncomfortable enough to consider a different perspective. One that compels society to adjust its moral compass based on conviction and grace, out of an appreciation for all things right, regardless of how difficult the right thing is. Right in terms of diversity, right in terms of inclusion, right in terms of inclusion to construct a society that cares about creating a tomorrow everyone can benefit from, because God is not stingy. My truth doesn't have to be your insults or threats. All I want is what my ancestors want, to live, to create, and to be great without consequence. Thank you.
Can you all please give another warm round of applause for Alice Saunders, Dr. Hillary Van Dyke, Attorney Stephanie Franklin, and Patricia Myers-Tedesco.
We at Dr. Jackson, we've been doing these presentations for a while, and I will tell you, you all were very fortunate as far as with the segment that you just witnessed, because that is a very powerful example of what it looks like to organize a movement. It's easy to come to these types of events and feel good about the work that's being done, to feel good about, especially when we think about reflecting and ancestors and things of that nature. But one of the things that's so important is to not only have a plan, but to have a plan with teeth. And so, as Attorney Franklin mentioned, although some of the individuals you may not necessarily be able to employ, the strategies that you all have just heard within that segment are vital. With Dr. Jackson representing the academic segment, what place does community serve? When we have community involved, how do we get government involved? That is how we get traction moving forward to enact laws and ordinances to ensure that these travesties do not continue to persist in our nation. So I just wanted to make that point. Very powerful segment. So with that, we're going to actually transition into the final portion of our program, which actually features a panel discussion with community activists sharing their experiences and information on support efforts. And we will conclude this segment with a powerful performance from an artist by the name of J.D. Dawson, who utilizes poetry, music, and storytelling to empower individuals and strengthen communities. And this portion will also be followed by a Q&A session. And so we encourage you to utilize this time to ask any questions that you have regarding anything that you've heard during our program to any of the individuals that you've heard those things from. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Starting at the very end, we have the treasurer of the Clearwater Colored Cemetery Society, Ms. Patriva Mack. We give Ms. Mack a round of applause. Senior director next to her, we have the president and founder of the Cemetery Society, Ms. Eileen Henderson. Seated in the middle, we have an advocate for Whispering Soul Cemetery, Ms. Jacqueline Hayes. And then you also have the publisher of the St. Pete Bulletin and the Long Beach Times newspaper, Ms. Barbara Sori Love. And of course, you all have already heard from our illustrious leader, Dr. Antoinette Jackson, who's with us. There is one individual who was slated to be a part of our panel who is unable to join us today. She was the director and founder of the Friends of Belmont Heights, Miss Noreen Copeland Miller, who was a staunch and major advocate for much of the work that is being done. And so next slide. So as we mentioned, when we talk about the work that is being done with Dr. Jackson, Ms. Noreen Copeland Miller, next slide, that we were able to connect with in regard to this work was a critical component. Keep going. Was a critical component in some of the work that we've been able to do in this community. And so we want to give a special shout out to her. You'll see her image come up on the screen as we go forward with our panel discussion. But as to not delay, thank you panelists for being with us here this afternoon. And so what I'd like to do is have you all to share. I've given a really brief introduction of your titles, but I'd like for you all to give an introduction of yourself related to your relationship with your cemetery and preservation efforts, starting with Ms. Patriva.
All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As they said, I am Patriva Mack. Most people call me Triva. And I am the grant coordinator as well as the treasurer of the 3C Society, which stands for Clearwater Colored Cemeteries. And I've been doing my family history off and on for over a decade. And I kept experiencing a stumbling block. I get the death certificates of my ancestors and the burial location would say the Clearwater Colored Cemetery. And I'd ask my relatives, my mom, one of my oldest relatives who was still in her right mind, she was 96 at the time, where is the Clearwater Colored Cemetery? And every person I approached had no idea what I was talking about. And the reason for that is because the city of Clearwater never documented the location. Now the cemeteries had names. The original for the St. Matthew's Cemetery that was established in 1909 was known as the St. Matthew Baptist Colored Cemetery. And then in 1940, the city of Clearwater decided it was inadequate and said the location was inadequate. And they mandated and sought out, located a new location that was 1 acre smaller and put out, I forget what the correct word was, but they put out a notice that no black burials in Clearwater could take place once that new location was up and running. So there was no question as to why it falls under the so-called abandoned. But today, that cemetery and the one they moved it to are what we would call completely erased. And by that, and I think Dr. Jackson alluded to it, it's sitting under a building, a parking lot, or a roadway. And that's totally unacceptable. And I'll pass the mic.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and I would be remiss if I did not do what Ms. Noreen Copeland-Miller would expect me to do, which is what she taught me, is to say thank you to Dr. Jackson for allowing me to be a part of this panel. Thank you. I am a little lost without her because we were joined at the hip with the Memorial Park Cemetery project. She taught me a great deal. The Cemetery Society, which I am the founder of, I actually started that with the Save Woodlawn Cemetery project. The interesting thing with that particular project is that we were not fighting our municipality, the city of Tampa. We were actually fighting private property. A lot of people didn't know that. However, what I have learned is in order to get attention and for people to pay attention, you have to sensationalize it. So when I talked about Woodlawn Cemetery and saving Woodlawn Cemetery, I got their attention because that cemetery started in 1888. One of the things that we found during our research is there is a Black designated section in that cemetery, and we also use that because through GPR studies with USF, our research indicated that it could possibly be that area that we were fighting for to keep developers from building townhomes. And it worked. We got a unanimous vote for them not to rezone, and so therefore there are no townhomes that were built on that private property. That was quite a feather in our cap, especially since I was told it will never happen, you will never win against private developers in Tampa because of what's happening. But we did, and I thank City Council for that. Noreen Miller and I met. From there, I started the Cemetery Society because I found real quickly that nobody really cared about our historic cemeteries. As a fifth generation of Tampa, I had people buried in these cemeteries throughout the city of Tampa. In fact, my great aunt and uncle were buried just 3 rows from where they were going to build those townhomes. And out of respect to my mother and my aunt, I was not going to have them visit a cemetery where they had to listen to what happens in townhomes just feet away from where our ancestors are buried. Memorial Park Cemetery, I'll tell you what, that was one ride that I'll never forget. Most specifically because I did get to meet Miss Noreen Copeland-Miller. She was a force to be reckoned with and taught me so much. The truth behind that cemetery, and Dr. Jackson knows that I love to tell this truth because I don't ever want us to forget that truth. But the truth behind that cemetery is that cemetery was sold at auction to the highest bidder, and the highest bidder at that time was $18,000, and he was a property flipper. For 2 years, the city of Tampa worked behind closed doors to get rid of that cemetery. The only reason we found out about that cemetery is because the Cemetery Society had already done 2 cleanups. And when I was asked to do a cleanup at another cemetery, they then told me, I didn't ask, I didn't know. They said, if you want to clean Memorial Park Cemetery again, you're going to have to contact the new owners. New owners? What are you talking about? We had just been in that cemetery. Apparently it had been auctioned off and we didn't even know. Technically, we could have been arrested. City of Tampa never told us that. I then took that information, sent it to some key people, and I will give kudos to Mr. Lou Claudio. I know he doesn't want me to say that, but he was able to get it to the media. Within 4 days, we had it in the papers. And then within 7 days, we approached council to let them know. And that's where I met Noreen Copeland-Miller. And from there, it's history. Bottom line is, city did the right thing, even though we were told they would never buy the cemetery. They were going to let it go because the city of Tampa is not in the business of buying cemeteries. Well, guess what? They bought the cemetery. And it was a unanimous vote to buy that cemetery. A lot of that credit goes to Ms. Maureen Copeland Miller. I just want to make sure that you understand that that's where it really should go. She had 12 family members buried there. Some were military, including her mom. So this was a big coup for her to be able to do this. And I will make sure, moving forward, that the city of Tampa continues to do the right thing with Memorial Park Cemetery. I can assure you of that. One more thing, if I may, Dr. Jackson, you know I have a hard time keeping it brief, is we are fighting for College Hill Cemetery. Some of you may or may not know where that cemetery is, but I have many things on my stove that simmer, but this right now is sort of bubbling over. And I have no issues calling people out, and the bottom line is, the Italian Club needs to step up and do the right thing. They built over a black cemetery. They are parking on black bodies and Cuban bodies because they were both buried there, and that is my next plight. We have gotten the attention of City Council. There will be a letter written to the state. They are committing a felony of the 3rd degree, and that is the fight we are fighting right now. And if anybody is interested in helping that cause, please contact me, because I am planning a protest on their sidewalks, and we are going to make it happen. We are going to regain that cemetery back. Thank you.
Well, this is a good transition. I'd like to follow. Good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline Hayes, and I'm not just an advocate for Whispering Souls, I'm the president of the board. Whispering Souls is a cemetery that our nonprofit owns. And I wasn't going to be a part of this panel. I'm glad Professor Jackson asked me. I wanted to sit there and learn. But now I realize why she asked me to take part, because as I'm listening to all this great information, I'm thinking, we've done all that. Our organization has done all that. We started in 2017. The cemetery was brought to me by Louis Claudio, who's in the back, who had found the cemetery, African-American cemetery in Clearwater, Florida, and decided that he wanted to help save it, but couldn't find anyone to help him. 20 years he struggled to find help to save the cemetery. He went all over Safety Harbor trying to organize. 20 years. A lot of people would have given up. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I didn't know of the cemetery. My grandfather and my grandmother and a host of relatives are buried there. When I came to Florida in 2016, I met Lou. And he was looking for help. And I'm like, I had been to that cemetery, I didn't like it. It was run down, it was raggedy. I said, this doesn't even look like a cemetery. Is it really a cemetery? I did not like to go out there. My grandparents were buried there, I just didn't want to be there. But then I found out that this man was trying to save the cemetery. He asked me if I would help. And I was conflicted, because I didn't like that place. I said, is this really a cemetery? It looks like a dump. And then we finally decided to meet, and upon meeting, he had a stack of papers that high, 20 years of research, oh Lord Jesus. He's going through page by page by page by page by page by page. When it gets down to the last 20 or 30 pages, I keep seeing my family's name on it. I'm like, well, why would the Hazes be in this mix? And he said, well, I talked to these people in Boston, Massachusetts for research. Huh? And then it kept going and going and going. Finally, we get to the deed. And I'm like, well, you know, like the attorney says, they're written in this scribbly cursive. What does it say? Well, one of the owners that signed it was Charlie Smith, my grandfather. I had no idea. I was like, Charlie Smith, that's my grandfather. So my grandfather had an organization, was a part of an organization in the 60s that would bury black people who didn't have means. They were deeded this land by this philanthropy family, and they decided we are going to take care of our community. St. Paul's Helping Hand Society. I knew none of this. And I knew none of this because we are first generation Bostonians. And when my mother left Safety Harbor, Florida, she's from Georgia. My father's from Tarpon Springs, Florida. My grandfather, Charlie Smith, said, I will not have Yankee grandchildren. And then I found out that if you're a black Yankee, it's worse than just being a regular Yankee. So we knew nothing of the history. So when I met Lou Claudio, I'm learning my family history. I said, my grandfather did what? And so here I am, I never met him. I was afraid to meet this man. I never met him, but I am continuing his work. We are legal owners of Whispering Souls for 3 years. We fought that battle. We did everything she said. We took on Safety Harbor, because Safety Harbor was a place that was known for its racism. I'm from Boston. You can show me race, I know exactly what to do. We were a grassroots organization for 3 years. We fundraised, we raised money. I did not get a lot of black community support because I was a black Yankee. I found that out. But the people in Safety Harbor said, we're gonna step up and we're gonna help you. And what happened was, we had a rainbow coalition of people, all walks of life, all kinds of money in the pot. Poor, black, white, rich, everything. They said, we're gonna save this cemetery. Cemetery was saved. By the time the government called me downtown to talk about, what are you all doing? We had already been all on the news. Who are these people? Who is backing them? People generated. I said to them in that first meeting, I'm gonna say this once and for all. If you don't give us what we want, you know your history better than I know the history. I couldn't understand why there would be a cemetery that was separated. The black people couldn't be buried with the white people. It didn't make sense to me. I found out all about it. If you don't help us save this cemetery, guess what the next news story is gonna be? I'm not playing with you. From that moment on, we've got nothing but support. We are the first organization where we have 3 governments supporting us because no one wanted to step back. We have the City of Clearwater, City of Safety Harbor, and also the county. They have never worked together on a project before until we came in the mix. So we're proud of our work. And I tell everybody, it's a community-based organization which created a new community of people who are willing to step up from all different walks of life, different political backgrounds to say, we are gonna right this wrong, and guess what? We got it done. Thank you.
Yes, you are a hard act to follow. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Sori Love, and I appreciate my cousin Walter Jennings introducing me. However, I'm not here as a reporter. I'm here to share my story. And a lot of the information that has been shared here today validates me telling, again, my stories. My mother, Johnny Lee Sori, told me her stories when I was growing up. At the age of 5, she would put my sister and I to her kitchen table. And she would tell us stories about how she grew up in North Florida, specifically Mariana, Bascom, Greenwood, those areas. And as a 5-year-old, you wonder, well, why is she telling me all these stories? And I understand now she's telling me these stories so that I would tell my story. Deuteronomy 6:6-9. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. This selection of scripture is what I use to encourage me to continue telling my stories. I was born January 17, 1952, to Johnny and Johnny Lee Sori in the basement of Martin Plant Hospital, Clearwater, Florida, during the Jim Crow era. We lived in an area which was then known as the Mac Dixon subdivision. Mac Dixon subdivision was founded in 1909 by African American Mike Dixon, who is a relative of Miss Treva. He moved his family to Clearwater in the 1920s from, I think, Chiefland, Florida. In the Clearwater Heights area, or Mac Dixon subdivision, 1931, Pinellas High School was founded on Mac Dixon subdivision. Now that community, which is now called Clearwater Heights, is an erased community. In 1952, I was born. 1954, a new Pinellas High School was built. 64 years later, 2016, the Clearwater Heights, also known as the Mac Dixon subdivision, is erased. In that community, there were 3 churches and one cemetery. The churches were Bethany CME, New Zion Baptist, and Friendship Baptist Church. There is only one church left that's not active, it's the Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. And the cemetery, which was known as, Treva found a document that calls it St. Matthew Colored Cemetery, but there's also a document, a legal document that lists the name of the cemetery as St. Matthew Negro Cemetery. Now, in 2016, there were a group of us from the Clearwater Heights community who got together. We were planning a cookout for all of those who grew up in the Clearwater Heights community. There was Wanda Rembert, Ruth Rembert, Lynette Miller, and Tamika Barber. In one of those meetings, Wanda came in and said to us, I traced all of our family members who were moved from the St. Matthew Cemetery, with the exception of my great-grandfather, Thomas Jefferson Rembert. That is what opened up the conversation about the first cemetery that we knew then, which is now buried under the Crum building on 100 Missouri Avenue. Now, I went to the NAACP and I filed what's called a legal redress to reopen the case of finding out what happened to the St. Matthew Cemetery. As we started that discussion, then someone said, well, what about the cemetery in North Greenwood? Okay, so we also included in our research the North Greenwood Cemetery. Today, to make a long story short, today, the North Greenwood Cemetery, we had a dedication, historic marker dedication, of which I was one of the leaders to get that taken care of. A historic marker erected at the North Greenwood Cemetery. The marker is the North Greenwood African American Memorial Cemetery. Through archaeology researches, there are probably 55 bodies still there at the cemetery. At the St. Matthew Cemetery, which is at 100 Missouri Avenue, buried under the Crum building, where there's active, the Crum family, they have a business there. And there is a cemetery, the cemetery is still there. And when we meet with the city of Clearwater, they tell us that they cannot discuss it because of litigation. Now, when we met Dr. Jackson, I suggested doing a march down Cleveland Street. However, I am encouraged by the information that I've heard here today and the Black Cemetery Network. I'm sure that's going to be on the list of things to do. You know, Clearwater is where I grew up. They have the I guess, the beaches or in the top 10 beaches every year. However, Clearwater is not so pretty right now. And I appreciate this opportunity to share my stories, and my stories are similar to what everyone else is shared today, validating me to continue to tell my stories. Thank you so much.
Dr. Jackson, in the interest of time, what I'd like to have you do is to talk about the Black Cemetery Network, the connection and role with what we just heard from our panelists.
Yes, and I just want to thank the panelists again for sharing their stories and information. Thank all of you. And again, as you've heard, the Black Cemetery Network is a hub, a place where people, communities, legal, educational, all the resources, people will come together at the Black Cemetery Network and put these stories on the network. The network started out with 11 sites. It's now have over 182 sites. And it means when you're on the Black Cemetery Network site, it means you have a place to tell these stories, to put the information that you want. These sites up there are places where people who are actively working, trying to get attention to elevate their stories, make those things known. It is a hub, it's a place. I call it the front porch. So it is completely driven by people who have a story, who want to get some attention and elevation for that. And again, it's an institutional resource, meaning that we keep up the site, all the overhead that's involved in doing those things, as we all know, so that folk like these can just place the stories, and do the work they're doing, and we can help, facilitate. And that was the hope of the Black Cemetery Network, and to grow and be a resource. And so it is, as you have seen today, it works in hand with FPANS, Florida Public Archaeology Networks, and the Master Florida Site File. Of course, we don't have all the sites they have, but we support that. So when people put sites on the Black Cemetery Network, as Patty was saying, then that also becomes another site possibly for that master site file. So it is hand in hand. We're both supporting and elevating the things and the resources that places where people can get resources for the community. So again, it just has grown on its own, because you see the type of people, the work that are attracted to that, and it becomes a place where people quickly can go, remember the name, go and figure out where they can, in your community, your neighborhood, where can you go to help support people doing this work, or help add more names to the Black Cemetery Network and get some of the resources we have available. So I don't want to spend much time, but go out to the website. Again, first of all, it's visually stunning. Mm-hmm. And I'm not bragging about it, but we put the attention into doing that. Visual representation is an important part of all that we do. And the artistic interpretation. All of that is part of what the Black Cemetery Network is bringing together. It's an intentional practice. So that's what I want to say about that. Go out there, support us, know how you can support these folk. And I don't want to be too long, because we're getting ready to the end. We have food and fellowship. So when you have a chance, you can meet and talk to people that you've heard from today, and have some food on, this is part of it. So I don't want to miss the food. I'm smelling it, and I'm hungry. So I want to close it down, and thank you all.
Can we give all of our panelists a round of applause? And so to close out our program for this afternoon, would you all please help me welcome to the podium Miss Jamie Dawson.
The sound that saved a wretch like me. and now they are found. Pauper Cemetery, Pauper Field, poor black bones painted over by concrete. This isn't the first time bodies have disappeared. Poor, black, sold to an unmarked grave. It's difficult to heal generations when even after death they inflict wound to rotting body. When I say they, I mean he who dug, he who erected building, raised that which belongs to the United States of America, he who asked no questions about whose bones laid beneath the dirt. They, those who would desecrate a ghost's home and call it education, yet you can't learn how to die. My high school was built on a pauper cemetery, pauper field. Baby black bones bundled beneath buildings. This isn't the first time bodies have disappeared young, black, sold to a forgotten garden. Arms reach through mouths, through dirt, reaching for free air, reaching to find voice. Ghosts thrust themselves through concrete prison cell classrooms. Look, heads facing from whiteboard to window, a chorus of whispering souls. Enshrined in leaves of trees, we thought it was fog that misted the windows of our yellow school buses, but it was the dead, above ground, laughing and laughing all night long about how naive the living must be to send the children to them every day, to send them to the pauper field, pauper cemetery. Veteran black bones buried beneath bushes. This isn't the first time bodies have disappeared. Militant, black, and sold. Heritage is alive. Time stopped in grave sites a long time ago, so it is up to us. Now, I speak for her. I speak for the one who was scarred by the journey after becoming enslaved. 6,122 of them in an unmarked mass grave. Her body laid to rest next to a porcelain plate, something as delicate as her broken frame. Exposed in the ground, her skeletal teeth. If I got down on my knees and reached to save her remains from an eternal pit, all before someone bids to build a house on top of it. Do not keep enraged spirits caged. Ankles get snatched if you stomp on their graves, for they are the roses the concrete paved. Them in the pauper cemetery, pauper field, ancestral black bones reclaimed. This isn't the first time we have brought this to shame. So here are the flowers for them, frutillaries for your freedom. aster for your absolution, and a hydrangea for the healing of us all.